All right, we'll get started in just another minute. Okay. All right. Well, again, we're going to get started because I always like to reward the people who come on time. Thank you all for joining me. Gemar Chasima Tova. Welcome to the Shabbat Shuva Derasha, which of course is taking place on Zoom for obvious reasons, which I don't need to get into. The title of the Derasha is Reading the Lonely Man of Faith During Corona. The current pandemic, as I wrote on the flyer, has wrought new social and religious challenges not seen before in our lifetimes. Many of the familiar rhythms and habits of everyday life have been changed, and some will likely not return to normal for the foreseeable future. Much has been discussed and written already regarding the impact of the pandemic on our lives. But as I began to think about what I would speak about for this Shabbat Shuva Derasha and how I would reflect on the current situation through the lens of some Divrei Torah, I immediately thought of the critical ideas that are found in this book, this essay, The Lonely Man of Faith. Because no thinker, no essay, I believe, has gotten more to the heart of the challenges to faith posed by the modern world than the Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik Zichrono Livracha, and his essay, The Lonely Man of Faith. In this essay, published in 1965, the Rav addresses not the challenges to faith posed by biblical criticism, archaeology, or science. The Rav is discussing instead something different. The Rav is discussing the experience of what it feels like to be a believer in God, living in a world that operates in an entirely different way than a religious person, a way that is often not conducive to a person of faith. People of faith have always had to contend with the conflict between modernity and tradition. But what's unique about our era is that the pace of technological and social change has quickened. And the Rav was brilliantly sensitive to how the conflict that people of faith experience today has intensified. The Rav delivered these ideas as a series of lectures, which were then published in the Tradition Journal. And he delivered these essays and he wrote them out in very, very personal first-person terms. The Rav describes the experience of a religious person in the modern world as follows. And here we have the first slide in the PowerPoint presentation. It's page 2 if you've downloaded the PDF, the link to which is in the chat section. But let's read for a moment how the Rav describes the experience of a religious person in the modern world. And if for some reason your Zoom, my face is covering over some of the words, you can just minimize. You click the minimize line, and you can just get rid of my face. You're not missing anything. So let's dive into what the Rav says, how he describes this experience. Let me spell out this passional experience of the contemporary man of faith. He looks upon himself as a stranger in modern society, which is technically minded, self-centered, and self-loving, almost in a sickly narcissistic fashion, scoring honor upon honor, piling up victory upon victory, reaching for distant galaxies. By the way, the Rav was writing at the height of the space race between the USA and the Soviet Union, and the technological feats of reaching space were the singular pursuits of these two superpowers, reaching for the distant galaxies and seeing in the here and now sensible world the only manifestation of being. What can a man of faith like myself, living by a doctrine which has no technical potential, by a law which cannot be tested in the laboratory, steadfast in his loyalty to an eschatological vision, a vision of the Messianic era, whose fulfillment cannot be predicted with any degree of probability, let alone certainty, even by the most complex advanced mathematical calculations? What can such a man say to a functional utilitarian society, which is saeculum-oriented? Saeculum-oriented is just what can be practically done now in this time, and whose practical reasons of the mind have long ago supplanted the sensitive reasons of the heart. The Rav is describing here a certain sense of alienation or estrangement that he feels from the modern world around us. These feelings are what he refers to when he talks about loneliness, as it's captured in the title of the essay, The Lonely Man of Faith, and as we'll see in the content of the essay. The loneliness he's describing is not necessarily the experience of being alone with no one around. Rather, it's the kind of loneliness one experiences even when surrounded by others. But the others are so different from you that you feel no connection to them, and hence you feel alone. Imagine being among a group of friends and having personal connections with each person, but you yourself are suffering from some challenge that your friends around you are completely unaware of. And therefore they offer you no support in that, whatever that challenge is. That's the sort of loneliness that the Rav is describing for the man of faith in contemporary society. There are certain ways in which the modern world, with its great successes in mastering nature, technology, even outer space, this modern world feels alien and unhospitable to a person of faith. A person of faith has a certain way of thinking about the world that the modern world just cannot understand. And so the person of faith feels alone. To understand the basic conflict, the reason why the man of faith, the person of faith, feels alone or estranged from the modern world, to understand the conflict between those two, the Rav presents two typologies, two archetypes, two theoretical character types that exist in every person to varying degrees. He introduces two aspects of the character of every human being. And he finds these character types represented by the two different accounts of creation found in the Torah. When we open up the Torah, when we turn to Bereshis, very soon on Simchas Torah, we'll find that both Perek Aleph and Perek Bet contain their own account of the creation of the world. And in these two different accounts of the creation of the world, humanity is created. It expresses the way in which humanity is created in different ways. And those two different ways, the Rav refers to, he calls them Adam 1 and Adam 2. Adam 1 refers to how the creation of humanity is described in Perek Aleph, and Adam 2 refers to how the creation of humanity is described in Perek Beis. And of course, there are differences in these two accounts of how humanity is created. And the Rav identifies four primary and fundamental distinctions between these two accounts. Let's discuss these four distinctions. On the screen in front of you, you have Adam 1 and Adam 2. Adam 1 is found in Perek Aleph, and Adam 2 is found in Perek Bet, as I said. And the four differences are presented here to you in different colors. so that the matching color from one parak to the other represents a difference. So if we turn to parak Aleph, Adam 1 on the right-hand side, Vayivra Elokim esa Adam b'tzalmo, b'tzelem Elokim bara oso, zacharo nekeva bara osam. Hashem, Elokim, created man or humanity, b'tzalmo, in his image, in God's image. B'tzelem Elokim bara osam. They were created in the image of God, zachar nekeva bara osam. They were created man and woman. So you see highlighted in green is the first important distinction between the first and second account. In the first account, man is created in the image of God. But look over on the left, what's highlighted in green. In the second account of the creation of humanity, in Parak Beis, what does it say in green? I'll begin with the beginning of the pasuk, pasuk Zayin. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim es Adam, afar min ha'adama, vayipach be'apav nishmas chayim. Hashem Elokim created humanity, Adam, not Chava, Adam, afar min ha'adama. Highlighted in green, right? He created man from dust of the earth and he breathed life into his nostrils. That's very different than what it says in the first account. In the first account, it says humanity was created in the image of God. In the second account, humanity is created from the dust of the earth. And then Hashem breathed life into him. A critical difference, the meaning of which we'll see very soon. That's the first critical difference. The second one, highlighted in blue. Look at Pasuk Chavchet on the right-hand side. Vayivarech osam Elokim vayomer lohem. Hashem blessed Adam and Chava, Zachar and Nekeva. He blessed them, vayomer lohem, and said to them, Elokim pru urvu, be fruitful and multiply, umil'u es haaretz v'kivshuha. Fill the earth and conquer it, master it. That is the mandate, that is the directive given to humanity by God when they are created, that they should master, dominate the world. Look at the blue on the left-hand side. In the second account of creation, a very different approach. Pasuk Tezvav. I'm sorry that the letters are a little scrunched. It's Tes and then Vav. It really should be Tezvav. Vayikach Hashem Elokim es Adam vayanechehu bigan Eden le'avda u'l'shamra. Right? Hashem took Adam and put him in the garden, not to master it, to serve and protect it. Who's the master in this account? The earth is the master, and humanity serves the earth. The opposite of what we saw in Parak Aleph in the first account, where humanity was told to master the earth. That's the second fundamental difference. Third, highlighted in yellow. Look back on the right-hand side. Adam 1, Bereshis Parak Aleph, Zachar Nekeva bara osam. Hashem created man and woman together at the same time. Look at yellow on the left-hand side. Adam 2, Bereshis Parak Beis. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim es ha'adam. Hashem created first only Adam. And then look down at Pasuk Yud Ches, where Hashem declares, Lo tov hayos Adam levado, esa lo ezer kenegdo. It's not good that man should be alone. I will make him a fitting helper for him. Vayiven Hashem Elokim es hatzela. Hashem built the fifth rib after putting Adam into a deep sleep. He takes his rib and Asher lakach min Adam leisha ve'vi el Adam, and uses that to create woman and brings her to Adam. So instead of man and woman being created together in the first account, they are created one after the other. Hashem sees that man is alone, and so he creates woman and brings her to man. Fundamental difference. The fourth fundamental difference, and of course there are other differences, but these are the central ones, and that's highlighted in gray. Vayivra Elokim on the right-hand side, Elokim created, right? Hashem is referred to by the name Elokim throughout. In Parak Beis, referring to Adam 2, it's Hashem Elokim. Hashem is the more personal name of Hashem, right? The name of Hashem is his representation in this world. Elokim is a more general term, as Hashem as creator of the world. But the Yud Ke Vav Ke, the tetragrammaton, the four-letter name of Hashem, that's the more personal, more direct name of Hashem. So these are the four fundamental differences between the two accounts of the creation of humanity. And in the first half of this long essay, what the Rav does is he explains the meaning of these discrepancies, these differences. and how they illustrate two fundamentally different aspects of the human condition. Adam 1 is one aspect of what it means to be a person, what it means to be a human being created by God, and Adam 2 represents a different one. These are two typologies, two character types, which exist within each one of us to varying degrees, two aspects of the overall human personality. When the Torah describes Adam 1's creation in the first chapter, the language of him being created in the image of God, B'Tselem Elokim, means that a person is able to emulate, to be like God. And our first exposure to God in the Torah is God as creator, as the Borei Olam, the one who brought everything in the world into existence. And so fashioning a person in the image of God, like God, emulating God, means that people also are able to create, just like Hashem created. That we have the ability to create and to innovate. We are given the mandate, right, what's highlighted in blue, to subdue the earth, which represents our ability to study nature, to use science and technological ability in order to harness the physical world for our own purposes. Think of how many resources in this world we have used and bent to our will. Earlier in our history, we figured out how to use stone and wood. Later, metal. More recently, the electron and all the elements found in nature, especially nuclear energy. Every scientific and technological advancement is an expression of the way in which Hashem created us in his image as creative beings who are told to rule over the natural world and use it for our own purposes. When we are able to harness nature to improve our lives and the world around us, the Rav describes this as the ability to achieve dignity. And dignity is a very important word and concept in the Lonely Man of Faith and in our discussion this evening. Because what characterizes Adam 1, that aspect of the human condition, is that Adam 1 seeks to achieve dignity by striving to master over nature instead of having nature control us, instead of us being vulnerable to the elements. Take a look with me, please, the language of the Rav and how he describes Adam 1. I'm on page 4 if you're looking at the PDF, or right here on the screen. Adam 1, the brute's existence is an undignified one because it is a helpless existence. Man of old who could not fight disease and succumbed in multitudes to yellow fever or any other plague with degrading helplessness could not lay claim to dignity. Only the man who builds hospitals, discovers therapeutic techniques, and saves lives is blessed with dignity. Man of the 17th and 18th centuries who needed several days to travel from Boston to New York was less dignified than modern man who attempts to conquer space, boards a plane at the New York airport at midnight, and takes several hours later a leisurely walk along the streets of London. The brute is helpless and therefore not dignified. Civilized man has gained limited control of nature and has become, in certain respects, her master. And with his mastery, he has attained dignity as well. His mastery has made it possible for him to act in accordance with his responsibility. I'm sure these words that I just read to you capture our attention during a pandemic. Our inability to prevent the virus or stop its spread is a more brutish, less dignified existence. And at the same time, our ability to protect ourselves and work towards a treatment, work towards prevention, represents our ability to continue to pursue a dignified existence. But we'll have more to say about this later. Let's continue understanding the Rav's development of these ideas. The Rav gives Adam 1 a name, a descriptive name. Adam 1 is called Majestic Man. Adam 1 is called Majestic Man because Adam 1 represents the impressive power with which Hashem has endowed each person. And realizing this majesty is the goal or mission of this aspect of humanity's character. One other important point about Adam 1 is that he is created together with Eve, together with woman. This means that they have an immediate, instinctive sense of partnership and collaboration, but only in a functional and utilitarian sense, since, again, their primary motivation is to master the world around them. So much for Adam 1. Adam 2, on the other hand, as presented in Perek Beis, in the second version of creation, is not defined at all by his capacity to dominate his surroundings. He is not created in the image of God. Rather, he is created from the dust of the earth. And this generates a greater sense of humility and vulnerability. He looks at the world around him and feels small and overpowered. He seeks not to dominate the world, but rather is able to take in and observe the splendor and the grandeur of the entire creation. He has a more aesthetic or artful inclination, being able to appreciate all the wonder and detail in the creation of the world. This is why the Torah describes his mandate to serve and protect the garden, not to dominate and master it. While Adam 1 is seeking dignity through his mastery over nature, Adam 2 seeks something much more sublime. What Adam 2 seeks, the Rav calls redemption. Redemption is achieved by humbling oneself, demonstrating self-control, and surrendering to God. And by surrendering to God, Adam 2 finds what he ultimately longs for, which is connection, communion, and fellowship. He is created by God, breathing life directly into his nostrils. And that image of very direct, intimate contact is what describes his ultimate yearnings. I have for you right here on page numbered 5, just two brief quotes from the Rav, but there's so much that could be taken. Adam 2, he wants to understand the living, given world into which he has been cast, right? The given world, not the world that he manipulates, the given world that Hashem created. Therefore, he does not mathematize phenomena or conceptualize things. Adam 2's goal is not to learn and master nature, but rather to appreciate it, to be overpowered by it. Look at the second quote. He looks for the image of God not in the mathematical formula or the natural relational law, but in every beam of light. Watch the Rav's poetic language. In every beam of light, in every bud and blossom, in the morning breeze and the stillness of a starlit evening. In a word, Adam the second explores not the scientific abstract universe, but the irresistibly fascinating qualitative world where he establishes an intimate relationship with God. The fact that Adam 2 is created alone reflects the fact that he yearns for connection. He is created with a sense of aloneness so that it's something that he strives to overcome. He strives for connection, communication, communion with others. That he was created alone reflects the fact that he has a sense of loneliness that he is constantly striving to overcome. That aspect of the human condition. Hashem declares that it is not good for him to be alone, and his partner is brought to him for the sake of connection. Indeed, he must sacrifice a part of himself, his rib, in order to find communion, in order to find a partner. That is how woman is created. And so if Adam 1 is named majestic man, Adam 2 is named by the Rav covenantal man. Because the concept of covenant represents this notion of establishing connection and communion with another, with others. It's a covenantal, it's in covenantal relationships with others and with God that Adam 2 finds redemption from his loneliness. And I just want to make reference also to the two different names of God that we mentioned, that fundamental difference. The name Elohim that was used for Adam 1 is a general term for God as a power, as a creator. And so it's reflective of how Adam 1 is concerned with dominating the created world. Adam 2, however, is created also with the 4-letter more personal name, because Adam 2 is seeking relationship and connection, a more personal, intimate connection with God and with others around them. So let's just summarize at this point, and I have this chart here for you to help chart out and see the ideas in an organized way. So what we have here are the four critical differences, not the four critical differences, but the four ways in which the Rav identifies Adam 1 versus Adam 2. Adam 1, his descriptive name is majestic man. He's looking for majesty. Majesty is achieved through his main objective, the second row, dignity. Adam 2 is covenantal man. And covenantal man, his main objective is redemption, to find redemption over his challenges. The central questions that Adam 1 and Adam 2 would ask are very different. Adam 1, who seeks to master the world, only wants to know how the world functions. Adam 2, however, wants a deeper meaning, a deeper sense. Why does the world exist? And finally, and we're going to talk about this more now, Adam 1 and Adam 2 establish very different kinds of communities. In the bottom row, Adam 1, the kind of community that Adam 1 develops is a natural work community. It's purely functional and utilitarian, as opposed to Adam 2, who builds a covenantal faith community. And I'm going to describe now what that means. Because as I mentioned before, Adam 1 and Adam 2, these are archetypes. These are theoretical constructs. Each of us has elements of both. But clearly, in the way the Rav spells each one out, it's important to emphasize that Adam 2 represents the most important values of Jewish life, of religious experience, of faith experience in general, I should say. Adam 2 is the part of us that seeks to realize our religious destiny and to do so together with a community of those that share our faith, those who also seek to establish covenant. The relationships that Adam 2 forges in the covenantal faith community are far deeper than what Adam 1 develops in the natural work community. These are relationships where individuals demonstrate concern for each other through acts of kindness and prayer. I'm talking about the covenantal faith community. This sense of fellowship and friendship redeems a person by relieving him or her of their feelings of isolation and incompatibility with others. Take a look, please, at this quote from the Rav. And you'll see I chopped it up here, because he describes each community in contrast with the other. And so I'm going to read first the blue highlights of Adam 1 and the descriptions of his community versus the yellow highlights of Adam 2 and his community. Adam 1 in blue, his community is characterized by a social surface relation. I'm reading the blue highlight. In the majestic community, remember Adam 1 is majestic man, in the majestic community in which surface personalities meet and commitment never exceeds the bounds of the utilitarian, right? Adam 1's goal is to master nature, and the only relationships that he establishes are ones that help him do just that, to advance. They never exceed the bounds of the utilitarian. We may find collegiality, neighborliness, civility, or courtesy. But, and let's read the yellow highlights, Adam 2 seeks a very different kind of community. The covenantal faith community, which is marked, I'm reading the yellow highlights, by friendship. It's an existential, in-depth relation between two individuals, a truly deep connection. And it's realizable only within the framework of the covenantal community. Reading the last highlight, friendship, which is the exclusive experience awarded by God to covenantal man. And so in the covenantal faith community of Adam 2, the relationships that are established are real, meaningful relationships. They're relationships of the shared mission of establishing covenant with Hashem. Now, even though Adam 2 captures more of what it means to be a person of faith, we should remember, though, that both Adam 1 and Adam 2 represent aspects of our character, and both were created and willed by God. Take a look, please, at this quote on the next side from Rabbi Sachs. Rabbi Sachs wrote a brilliant essay analyzing the lonely man of faith, and I'm going to read what he wrote here. Why the two Adams? Evidently, because both are inescapably part of the human condition. In every one of us abide the two persona, the creative, majestic Adam the first, and the submissive, humble Adam the second. Both modes of existence are willed and sanctioned by God. He commands man to build, construct, plan, and create. He endorses both majestic man, right? The Rav endorses both majestic man and the communities he fashions. At the same time, he also, he's referring to Hashem. At the same time, Hashem, also requires of man to forget his functional and bold approach, to stand in humility and dread before the mysterium magnum, the great mystery surrounding him of the cosmos. To reject either would be tantamount to an act of disapproval of the divine scheme of creation. So again, even though Adam 2 represents more of what it means to be a person of faith, but Adam 1 is still very much part of who we are, and Hashem created us that way. God desires both Adams. God created each and every one of us with an element of each one of these archetypes. There are two quotes here. Rabbi Sachs quoted the first one, so I'm not going to read it again. And look at the second one. Let us not forget that the majestic community is willed by God as much as the covenantal faith community. Both kinds of community are willed by God. The functional utilitarian, conquer, master the world scientifically, technologically, that kind of community is willed by God, as is the covenantal faith community. He wants us to engage in the pursuit of majesty, dignity, as well as redemptiveness. Up until now in this class, up in this talk, so I've been teaching or summarizing the major part of the Rav's essay, really the first half. And in the second half of the essay, he goes on to make some very, very important arguments, some very important critiques of modern religion, which I'm not going to be addressing here. Because I would like to take what we have learned thus far and use it to deepen our understanding of the pandemic's impact on our faith community and draw lessons from this experience. The first lesson is that the pandemic is a stark reminder of our divine mandate represented by Adam 1. At a time when we have achieved so much dignity, the pandemic reminds us how much of God's world isn't under our control and yet can be if we continue to pursue the mandate of Adam 1. On one level, we are commanded to pursue medical and scientific research based on particular mitzvos, narrow mitzvos. The mitzvos of v'chai b'hem, right? You should live by them. V'nishmartem od l'nafsho seichem. You should maintain your health. Lo samad dam riecha. You should not stand idly by when your friend is in danger. Those are all technical mitzvos. But what the Rav is doing here is something much more fundamental. Here we learn that our mandate to contend with this pandemic isn't based merely on technical mitzvos. It's a mandate endowed within us by our Creator at our very inception, when we were first created. It's part of our basic constitution as humans, as people of faith. And what the Rav has found in these two accounts of creation, the description of these two character types isn't mere exegesis. This isn't just commentary on the Torah. These aren't just mere observations. These are divine mandates that we are meant to live by. We are meant to live in covenant. We are meant to live in dignity and majesty. And I believe that there is one community, one type of community in particular, within the broader Jewish people, that strives to live out both of these mandates. And it's a small subsection of the Orthodox community, which is already a small percentage of the entire Jewish population around the world. The modern Orthodox community, which is a very small percentage of the Orthodox community, lives by these mandates. Majesty and humility on the one hand, dignity and covenant, majesty and humility, dignity and covenant. Our appreciation for both the values of the Torah as well as our capacity to embrace the world that Hashem has put us in, and the way in which we struggle to balance the two is a true fulfillment of this dual mandate. And I've seen it play out in the current pandemic. The way in which the modern Orthodox communities have blended their religious obligations with a healthy, pun intended, understanding of science, medicine, and epidemiology has enabled our communities in particular to prevent mortality rates experienced in other places. Furthermore, physical distancing is a fulfillment of the divine mandate of Adam 1. Scientific research and medical knowledge are a fulfillment of a divine mandate, and they have produced the physical distancing guidelines that we live by. They're not perfect. They get changed as we continue to learn more, but they are a direct fulfillment of the mandate of Adam 1. Hashem wants us to embody those values of Adam 1, the values of dignity and majesty. And the only way to achieve dignity during a time of pandemic is to observe physical distancing. But the mandate of Adam 1, physical distancing, also produces loneliness. The very thing that Adam 2 is seeking to overcome. Which is why this essay of the Rav, the Lonely Man of Faith, this analysis of Adam 1 and Adam 2 was written almost prophetically for today, for our situation. We are being tested, challenged to live up to these two mandates in a way like we've never have before, to maintain dignity and redemption, to pursue what dignity expects us to do, which is physical distancing, and to also counter the challenges of finding redemption, which are compromised by physical distancing because they produce loneliness. And redemption is when we're able to overcome that loneliness. We are being challenged like never before to actualize Adam 1, and the repercussions of that make it more difficult, but more urgent and pressing to actualize Adam 2. We have an even more heightened awareness of our essential need for communion with others and communion with God. And the only way to achieve this communion is through commitment, through sacrifice, through compassion, and through giving. We have to be humble and think less about ourselves and more about what we can do to connect to God and connect to those around us. Indeed, some of the achievements of Adam 1 enable us to pursue the values of Adam 2. Communication technology, the internet and social media has connected us to those who are alone and those who are in need and those who need support. And yet, we must be careful to recognize the limits of these technologies. When they infiltrate too much of our social lives, they become alienating. They distance us from each other. We live in a far more polarized world because of how much we connect electronically. This is the unique challenge of our time. How to harness the benefits that communication technology can do for us and guard ourselves against all the detriments that communication technology can cause in our lives. And that's the real struggle, the balance of living up to the values of Adam 1 and Adam 2 at the same time. Second lesson. If we simply follow the first lesson, to live out the values of Adam 1 to achieve dignity in a time of pandemic, it still will not bring us a sense of meaning or redemption. The pandemic is a harsh reminder that we are responsible not only to embrace the mandate of Adam 1 in order to overcome and cope with the challenges of the pandemic, but that we find true redemption only in the mandate of Adam 2. And what is that mandate today? What does it mean to live up to the values of Adam 2? That's to recognize that we achieve redemption only through covenantal engagement. And covenantal engagement means prayer. It means worship. It means serving others and caring for others. If you think about it, the Rav doesn't mention this, but in the creation of Adam 2, it refers to Chava, refers to the woman as Ezer Kenegdo. That man is not only created alone and then brought companionship, but that companionship is identified, is described as a partnership, Ezer Kenegdo. And so it's through feeling that sense of partnership and commitment to those around us that we can achieve the redemption that is mandated by Adam 2. We won't find meaning. We won't find meaning in our lives if we simply just overcome the pandemic medically, scientifically. We will find meaning in our lives when we overcome the challenges imposed upon us socially and spiritually by the pandemic. Third and final lesson. The Rav focuses to a great extent in his philosophy on the individual, on the inner life of the Jew. And true, this essay discusses the kinds of community fostered by Adam 1 and Adam 2, but nevertheless, it is distinctly individuals who create these communities. And because the Rav focuses so much on the individual, there is an underlying implicit lesson here, that it is the individual who makes the community, not the community who makes the individual. Sure, we are influenced by our surroundings, but it is the inner life that a Jew creates for him or herself that is primary. That's the primary focus of the Rav, and that's the thrust of this essay, The Lonely Man of Faith. When he describes the aspects of the human condition of Adam 1 and Adam 2, he's talking about individual people and what individual people achieve in pursuing and realizing those aspects of their character. But it's the individual that powers everything that's going on. There's a powerful statement from Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch on this topic that was brought to my attention recently. And I believe it highlights this point very well. As the leader of the German Jewish community in the 18th century, Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch was at the forefront of the battle against the Reform movement and was an articulate spokesman and advocate for traditional Jewish thought. And I want to read with you a paragraph, not from Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, but from Dayan Grunfeld. Dayan Isidore Grunfeld, who is a scholar of the 20th century, who wrote an introduction to Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch's book of Jewish thought called Chorev. And in this introduction, Dayan Grunfeld writes as follows, and then he quotes Rav Hirsch. He was talking about the mistaken belief or putting too much importance into the synagogue by the Reform movement. Let's read what he wrote. This leads to the basic idea of Hirsch's philosophy of Judaism, the sanctification of life. Avoda is usually translated by divine service, which refers to prayer in the house of God. In an attempt to assimilate Judaism to the dominant faith, the German Jewish reformers of the last century introduced the idea into modern Jewish thought that worship of God in the synagogue is the central point in Jewish life, whereas in reality, the law of the Torah should permeate and rule the whole of life, meaning not just the synagogue. Against this fundamental error of localizing God in the house of worship, instead of allowing him to become a central force in our life, Hirsch wrote some of his most trenchant essays, and one of which he had the courage to exclaim. Now here's the quote from Rav Hirsch. If I had the power, I would provisionally close all synagogues for 100 years. Do not tremble at the thought of it, Jewish heart. What would happen? Jews and Jewesses without synagogues, desiring to remain Jewish, would be forced to concentrate on a Jewish life and a Jewish home. The Jewish officials connected with the synagogue would have to look to the only opportunity now open to them to teach young and old how to live a Jewish life and how to build a Jewish home. All synagogues closed by Jewish hands would constitute the strongest protest against the abandonment of the Torah in home and life. This dramatic passage, Diane Grunfeld writes, throws into relief the wrong notion that synagogues in themselves are sufficient to perpetuate Judaism. Think about it. Rav Hirsch proposes the idea of closing all the synagogues, closing all the shuls, something that we did this year. And so one of the primary lessons we should be taking away from the pandemic is that our inner Jewish life, the Judaism we practice, begins inside of us and inside of our homes. Just think about how we were banished from our shuls this year and sent home to make Shabbos on our own, to daven on our own, to be confronted with our spiritual selves without the comfort of being in a minyan or a group. We were sent back to what I'd like to describe as a more primordial Jewish state of being. This doesn't mean the shul is any less important. It just reminds us that the shul gains its strength and its sanctity from what each of us choose to do in our homes. The shul enables us to realize our mandate represented by Adam 2, but we must come to that through our own journey, through our own personal development. And so the fact that the central focus of the Rav's essay, The Lonely Man of Faith, focuses on the individual's experience of their own Judaism is so instructive for us. Even though we've returned to some aspects of communal life, what's happened is this rupture in our community, which has laid bare the fact that in a time of physical distancing, it reminds us more of our responsibility to care for our inner lives as Jews and what we do in our inner life and how we realize that sense of redemption in the personal life of each and every one of us. And going forward, as I think about our community and our future in the months ahead, in the year ahead, in the years ahead, which is so hard to predict right now, so difficult to anticipate what the future holds. But as I think about the community, our emphasis has to include how we foster the inner life of each and every one of us. The way in which we daven, the way in which we learn, the way in which we do chesed has to be far more distributed. It cannot come strictly from the center, from the shul. Because what we have been made to realize this year is that we have to confront our own personal Jewish selves and experience our own inner Judaism and how we drive that ourselves in the physical separation, in the loneliness, and how we overcome that to realize how we fulfill the mandate of Adam 2. In the year to come, I hope and pray that each one of us spends some time thinking about what we can do to nurture, to cultivate our inner Jewish life, our inner personal Jewish life. And the shul's responsibility will be to help that along and to provide those opportunities so that people can do that and out of that basis contribute to our overall communal life as servants of Hashem here in Avas Torah. I wish you all a Gemar Chasima Tova, a happy, healthy year. May we all have opportunities to join together safely in the year ahead. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care and good night.